in Europe, it's the same. People become very complacent, and they don't take it seriously.
It's a serious challenge. I think we need to do more for people to know that he's not yet Uhuru.
It's not no, it's not gone at all.
Yes.
Let's see what happens with the American elections.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon, all participants who have joined already.
Oui, tout le monde est actif.
Bonjour, les collègues qui sont déjà avec nous.
Good morning, our colleagues who are already with us.
Nous allons bientôt commencer.
We are going to start very soon, and with a slight, a light kind of introduction as usual.
We will start soon. Vamos começar em breve. Já temos muitos participantes também dos lusófonos. Moçambique, Angola, Cabo Verde. Jeffy is smiling, so it's very good, a good sign.
On pourrait faire des présentations pour se faire connaître un petit peu peut-être de chaque personne en attendant les autres. Ou...
And we get to know one another a little bit while we await the rest.
So there is a proposal to just very briefly say a few who we have here around the table, but it has to be really very, very quick. So maybe we start. Who wants to start? Please, Tariq.
I will start. Tariq Al-Pindi, Secretary General of ANCAHI, Arab Network Quality Assurance. This is my first hat. My second hat, I am the General Director for the National Qualification Framework of Bahrain. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffy?
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeffy Mukora from the National Council for Quality Assurance and Accreditation in Higher Education. I'm the director responsible for external quality assurance and also the coordinator of the development of the National Qualification Framework in Mozambique. Thank you.
Bonjour. Bonjour, professeur Okiama. Je suis le secrétaire exécutif de l'Agence nationale d'assurance.
I'm the executive secretary of the National Agency of Qualifications in the DR Congo.
Hello. Yes. Very nice. Welcome to everybody from Austria, Vienna. Nice to meet you. I really enjoy these meetings. It's the best TV series in the past few months.
Thank you. Thank you. Sierra Leone, who would like to say a word? Engineer Jallo, if he's there. Otherwise, let us ask then James.
Thanks, Eduardo. Good afternoon, everybody. James Kiwi from JET in South Africa.
Thank you, James, being here. Dieudonné?
Yes. Yes, Eduardo. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Deodon Kunufine from Cameroon. I'm middle staff at the Department of Examination and Certification at the Ministry of Secondary Education in Cameroon. I'm also a lecturer at the National Advanced School of Engineering, Department of Civil Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. James from East Africa Community.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm Dr. James Joey, Principal Education Officer at the East African Community Secretariat. Thanks so much and very welcome.
Thank you. Very welcome to you, James. Professor Gemlich.
Yes.
Very
Here
short.
I am in Germany, and I love to participate in your webinar. Thank you very much for making it possible.
Oh, that's our pleasure. Thank you so much. Wanda, from São Tomé. Wanda, quer dizer que só o nome e a sua função? Wanda will speak in Portuguese, so please, you should activate your interpretation channel. You should choose your channel language. Wanda?
Boa tarde a todos. Chamo-me Wanda Costa, diretora do Ensino Superior de São Tomé e Príncipe.
Muito obrigada por estar aqui.
É um prazer participar nesse webinar. Está sendo muito interessante conhecer a realidade de cada país que estão cá presentes.
Muito obrigada, Wanda. So, please, Boubacar, vous voulez dire votre nom, votre fonction? Monsieur Boubacar? Peut-être qu'il n'est pas là. Anna Radavissa de Madagascar. Très bref, un bon mot.
Oui, bonjour à tous. Donc, je suis le directeur de curricula et la spatialité à Madagascar.
Bonjour. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous.
Et je suis ravie d'être là pour la deuxième fois.
Ah, enchantée.
Enchantée.
Je voulais aussi demander, donc, je crois qu'il y a le représentant du CAMES qui est avec nous. Voilà, le professeur Nzanga, oui. Voulez-vous dire un mot? Non? Donc, passons donc, Monsieur Cissé.
So, Mr. Cissé, Sénégal.
Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom c'est Abdullah Cissé.
My name is Abdullah Cissé. I'm the administrative coordinator.
De l'Autorité nationale d'assurance qualité de l'enseignement supérieur, de la recherche et de l'innovation du Sénégal. Je suis très content de participer à cette formation destinée pour les pairs et par les pairs. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Cissé. Enchanté, enchanté. Colleen and Miriam, you will have the opportunity to introduce yourselves during your presentations, but please, would you like just to say a word? Colleen, Miriam?
Hi, I'm Miriam from the Zambia Qualifications Authority, and yes, I will have an opportunity to introduce myself a little bit further. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Miriam. Welcome. Colleen.
Hi. Hi, I am Colleen from the South African Qualifications Authority, and I will speak to you later. Looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Mr. James has already. Mr. Jallo, Engineer Jallo, Director representing Sierra Leone. Would you like just to say a word to us?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not Engineer Jallo, but he stepped out of the room. He will be coming.
Okay, fine. Mr. Valentin, please. Robin Pulchund, would you like to say a word before we start?
Yes, hi, Eduardo.
Hi, Robin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi. Yes, hi. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I am a Qualifications Authority. I'm pleased to be here again.
Thank you, Robin. As always, you are with us. I see that Mr. Kobotlo from Lesotho is also with us. He has done a brilliant presentation 2 webinars ago. Mr. Kobotlo, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Eduardo, and good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon. Let me then see Elísio Fernandes. He is from Guinea-Bissau. He might speak in Portuguese, I think. Elísio, quer dizer o seu nome, a função?
Boa tarde. Sou Elísio Fernandes, da Agência Belga de Cooperação e Desenvolvimento, escritório da Guiné-Bissau. Estou a trabalhar como responsável para a área de coordenação e pilotagem do projeto.
Muito obrigada por estar aqui, Elísio, é um prazer. Ana Cláudia, de Angola.
Boa tarde a todos, obrigada, Eduarda. Sou Ana Pinto Andrade e pertenço à Unidade Técnica de Gestão do Plano Nacional de Formação de Quadros e neste momento estou a coordenar a implementação do Sistema Nacional de Qualificações em Angola. Obrigada.
Obrigada por estar de novo conosco. Anna has done a presentation at the previous webinar. We have Alex Lenoir. Voulez-vous dire un mot sur votre fonction, monsieur? Madame? Monsieur? Alors, so then let's move to Maxwell. Maxwell from Ghana. Maxwell also shared the Ghana experience at the last webinar. Welcome, Maxwell. Would you like just to say a word? We have many new participants, so we are getting acquainted again.
Eduarda?
Oui.
Oui, bonjour, Alex Lenoir, je suis désolé, j'avais mon micro qui était coupé, donc
Thank you very much. Thank you. Maxwell?
Yeah, good morning, Eduarda.
Hello, Maxwell.
And everyone. Yeah, good morning. Happy to be part of this session. The process so far has been very good, very helpful to us at this end, and I believe as we go on, we are all going to learn achieve the objectives set by the project team. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Maxwell. We will continue working together. Let me just see that. So we have a number of new participants coming in, but I would like just to suggest that we start immediately, not to be late. But in the meanwhile, I'd like to ask just Jahu Fal. She has been there, and I didn't pass her the floor. Jahu, we are so glad to see you. Please say a word about you and your organization.
Thank you very much, Eduarda. Hello to all. My name is Mrs. Jahufal. I'm the Secretary General of the Association of Technical Universities and Polytechnics in Africa. I'm sorry my background is a bit noisy because there is some construction works going on into the neighborhood. Pleasure to be with you again. Thank you. Thank you for the invite, Eduarda.
Thank you, always a pleasure. We will get acquainted with all the participants coming in. In the meanwhile, let us, if you don't mind, let us immediately start. So, colleagues, participants, greetings to all of you. My name is Eduarda Castelbranco, and I work on thematic content coordination of the project of the Africa-EU partnership that is supporting the development of the African Continental Qualifications Framework, ACQF. And as you know, this is already the 6th peer learning webinar of this series, started in July. So let us, as always, there is a little thing. Okay. Welcome to all of you, bienvenue, bem-vindos. I'd like again to just acknowledge the countries and organizations that are here with us, as you can see in the list, and thank you all of you for joining. And as always, there will be additional participants joining a bit later. So in this first session, we always do a brief introduction, and because we have so many new participants, I have to ask you again for a moment just to introduce the content of this webinar in the framework of the project Developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework. We always do a brief recapitulation of main learnings from the previous webinar and a very brief introduction of the 4 cases of this webinar, the 6th. As always, we will have a session of approximately 2 hours, 45 minutes. And of course, this will be a very intensive webinar with a lot of information and interactions. The 4 cases that will be shared today are interestingly, let's say, divided. So in the first part, we will have 2 national qualifications frameworks, Zambia and Cape Verde, completely different regions in Africa. And then in the second part, we will have 2 regional qualifications frameworks. So we start with the Southern African Development Community Qualifications Framework. Colleen will present, and then we will have the East Africa Community Regional Qualifications Framework or East Africa Qualifications Framework for Higher Education, and Dr. James Joey will share with us this experience. As always, there will be a session for questions and answers and a final, let's say, joint assessment using Mentimeter. So prepare your mobile phones. You will receive the link, so it will be very easy for you to join. And as I said, very briefly, let's just very briefly, in a few words, recall the context of this activity. So the African Continental Qualifications Framework is a policy initiative of the African Union. The development of this ACQF is underway, and our peer learning activities are part of that process. As you can see on the slide, we just wanted to recall and remind that the ACQF is supported by the key policies under the umbrella of African Union Agenda 2063, in particular, the AU, the African Union Protocol on Free Movement of Persons, the African Continental Free Trade Area. They all require a framework, a continental framework, but most importantly, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, which specifically addresses the Continental Qualifications Framework and its interactions with national and regional qualifications framework, as you can see on the slide. So the certificate if possible, let us all mute the microphones. You can stay with your cameras on. There is no problem with it. But the microphones, please let us mute. So the project Developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework started in 2019, second half 2019. It is going to run until the second part of 2022. And it is based on joint work of the African Union Commission, the European Union, GIZ, and European Training Foundation. So, as we have already seen in the previous webinars, the vision for the ACQF, as discussed with the stakeholders, means an inclusive scope, so all subsystems, levels of qualifications, receptiveness to innovation like new technologies, openness to good practice, stakeholders' contributions, to achieve the goals of comparability, quality, transparency of qualifications, recognition of qualifications, mobility, work in complementarity with national and regional qualifications frameworks, supporting the creation of a common African education space. And ACQF, the ACQF is seen as an overarching framework and also a hub catalyst for development of at national and level qualifications frameworks and their instruments. So naturally also the ACQF will be a reference for comparison with other international frameworks. Very briefly also on the process of development of the African Continental Qualifications Framework, the capacity development in brief, and the peer learning overview. So this is the next theme of this introductory presentation. So the construction of the ACQF comprises these main components, blocks, or steps. So the first step that completed now is the evidence, so the mapping study. Then the step starting now in 2020 will be dedicated to analysis of options for the ACQF as a sustainable policy instrument, then immediately linked with the design, reflection design of the ACQF policy and technical document with technical guidelines, website, database of qualifications tools, and testing alignment to the ACQF. So this will be a fundamental part of this project. And continuously, the capacity development activities with this purpose to shape common concepts, a common language, also mutual trust, and using various approaches like peer learning from real experiences, as we are doing now, and also a bit later, more advanced training plus application, support to countries, and networking. So, as I said earlier, we are now moving to this second part of the project, the second phase. We see the capacity development of the ACQF as an instrument for building the sustainability. And this means this combination of knowledge, common concepts, and also networking. And as you can see, then the peer learning activities are part of this, of this context, of this journey. Under networking, as you can see, we are talking about a network of trained experts, African experts, and also networking of the African national qualifications agencies, committees, institutions. We will then have by the end of October, so next week, the 7 ACQF peer learning webinars. This is a very brief overview of this journey. Started on the 2nd of July. We started in Kenya, and the journey will be concluded in Sierra Leone at the next webinar on the 29th of October. Further peer learning activities are being planned. They can be organized around themes such as, for example, monitoring and evaluation of NQFs, progress and contribution, and also more sharing of cases, country cases. So today we are here on the 6th webinar with Zambia, Cabo Verde, SADC Qualifications Framework, and the East Africa Qualifications Framework for Higher Education. This is a brief overview of the cases that we have had the pleasure to share at these webinars. So as you can see, 22 cases of qualifications frameworks were presented, plus including already the next webinar at these 7 peer learning webinars, meaning 17 NQFs, national qualifications frameworks, and 5 regional qualifications frameworks. And a bit earlier in May, we had also a number of webinars, and we had the opportunity to have very brief, very concise presentations from those 4 NQFs that you see. So Cabo Verde, Rwanda, Seychelles, and Tunisia. As you can see, we have tried to indicate in all the countries that have been presenting here. Some of them are, of course, part of a regional qualifications framework. This is a reportage, a coverage of the learning webinars so far. So when you will have a moment to look a little bit better at these presentations, you can see the objectives, the journey, the definitions that we have also used, definitions of national qualifications framework, qualification, regional qualifications framework, and also the various important topics that have been discussed here with all the peers. So topics such as the issues, objectives, and scope of national and regional qualifications frameworks. And we like very much to use this picture from Mauritius' presentation, Dr. Robin Pulchun, the jungle of qualifications. I think it's a very, very appealing notion. And the levels and level descriptors, the various types, the various cases that were presented, going from 7 levels in Tunisia to 10 levels in a large number of countries presenting, which shared their experiences at these webinars. The governance models are also summarized in the blue cards. Information on qualifications registers and catalogs, as well as finally in the last orange cards, you can see also a sum up of main notions from related with recognition of prior learning or validation of validation des acquis de l'expérience or recognition and validation of competencies. We always show you a little bit how well are we covering the different themes that have been planned for these peer learning webinars. So we have put together information on the frequency of these themes in the various presentations. And as you can see, some of them, such for example, scope, levels, and type of the NQF, have always been addressed in all presentations, in all cases, as well as the context, objectives, of evolution of the national qualifications frameworks. Whereas other themes have received less attention. For example, digitalization, or the theme on recognition of prior learning. Today we will have a strong contribution on recognition of prior learning. Very, very brief recap, because we invested some time in the initial presentation. Just to recall that in the previous webinar, we had these 4 cases: Angola, Egypt, Ghana, Zimbabwe. Altogether, a very large population, as you can see. Some common threads across the 4 cases are also highlighted here. And probably the most important, let's say, notion and aspect that was emphasized was this idea of establishing, constructing a story. So establishing the national qualification system was the topic of Angola, or NQF in the making was the main subject of the Ghana presentation. NQF has a story was the main subject dealt with by the presentation of Egypt. And also Zimbabwe spoke about the Zimbabwean story of quality assurance in higher education and NQF. We heard a lot about roadmap, milestones, and targets, as well as institutional and regulatory change. Now, very briefly, the most important findings or conclusions from these 4 very interesting cases, as I tried to say, sharing a number of common points. So Angola presented the current development, the current status of development of the national qualifications system, whereby the NQF is a pillar, is a component of the national qualifications system. It was also emphasized that this process benefits of a very strong political support expressed through the national development plan. We heard, of course, about the coordination of national institutions, the partnerships contributing to the process, also the orientation to African Union and SADC policies. And finally, we had this interesting example of digitalization in the context of management of qualifications and information for users through the app Qualificar. Ghana told us about the expectations, the hopes, and also the challenges related with the construction of the overarching qualifications framework. Currently, Ghana has an operational national qualifications framework, but related sectoral orientation, TVET. but the construction of the national overarching and comprehensive framework is starting. And this NQF will address these very fundamental issues, which are the fact that the qualifications are still disjointed. There is a difficult vertical and horizontal progression, lack of recognition of non-formal and informal learning, lack of harmonized credit system for standardized, equitable, and transparent system of qualifications, acquisition, recognition, and mobility. And also, we heard about the widening gap between educational attainment and labor market outcomes or expected skills. As said earlier, Egypt led us through a very comprehensive presentation, telling us the expectation and the strong focus and orientation for an NQF that will contribute to reform. And we heard about the story, the triggers, the phases, the different paces in different phases of the process, stakeholders' involvement, the strong emphasis on an NQF that is fit for purpose. This was clearly underlined. And the potential role for reform concerns NQF contributing to quality assurance, bridging the gap, building trust, recognition of qualifications, and mobility. Zimbabwe has the National Qualifications Framework approved since 2018, and you can see you received also you have seen that the book, the National Qualifications Framework book, has been also posted, uploaded in the website of the webinar. It integrates all subsectors of education and training, and we heard about the governance and also about minimum bodies of knowledge. And since our speakers are always preparing very nicely shaped and rich in content presentations, let us just look and to invite you to take a look, to take a moment to look at all these presentations and learn from the challenges and the expectations and the concrete steps that are being undertaken. So this is just the main, let's say, overview of how the NQF in Angola fits with the NQS, the National Qualifications System, and this is from the presentation that is on the web page. Then from the presentation of Ghana, we just wanted you to have a look again at the proposed map for this new overarching National Qualifications Framework, and also the challenges as identified by Maxwell Kisi, the representative of Ghana. And the challenges include various types of challenges, including of institutional nature, capacity nature, funding, stakeholders buy-in, and also the need for, let's say, technical support. In the case of the Egypt presentation, the presentation on the Egypt National Qualifications Framework, we selected this just also three main slides that we consider quite interesting for everybody, also to motivate you to go and take a look at all of them. The stages of development, the story in the last 2 years, whereby Egypt has submitted a draft for legislative amendments to the parliament in 2018. So this has been one of the important fundamental steps. And we also had the possibility to learn about the approach taken by Egypt to develop the level descriptors, and this has been, I would say, quite presented in quite a good level of detail by Professor Johansson, and also take a look also at the challenges facing implementation as also recognized in the presentation. Again, challenges of different nature, and as you can see, engaging the stakeholders and buy-in appears again, as in the case of Ghana. Zimbabwe, as I said, you have this information, you have the book of the Zimbabwe National Qualifications Framework, which, as you can see, is comprehensive, encompasses the 3 subsectors. In the book, you have a very very clear and very well visualized presentation of the objectives. I just took a snapshot for you to recall. Then this also important point, which are the elements for comparability of qualifications, namely minimum bodies of knowledge, qualification standards, and skills proficiency schedules. Also information on the credit accumulation and transfer system, which is now Zimbabwe entered into or adopted the notional hours approach. All of this to create an integrated learning system. Here, the link to the website of the ministry where you can find all this information. And very important, I found the fact that in the website there is concrete information about the activities as planned and progress to date related with implementation of Zimbabwean National Qualifications Framework. I will not go, of course, into details, but I just wanted also to highlight, and you can have a look in the presentations at the various interesting pieces of information we have been receiving and that were shared by various countries on the effects and the responses to the COVID-19 crisis, but from the point of view of NQF and quality assurance agencies. So I just selected here, for example, the case of Ghana and Egypt, the information shared on their responses to crisis. And as you can see, there is a very strong emphasis in making procedures more flexible, adjusting to the new normal. And so now, to finalize this introduction, I would like then to thank very much the 4 speakers who have accepted to generously share with us today the experience and related with these 4 cases, as already highlighted earlier. So 2 national qualifications frameworks and 2 regional qualifications frameworks. As you can see, putting together the population of these 4 cases, we have something like, well, let's say 500 million people. As you know, there are some countries that are in the two regional regional economic communities. For example, Tanzania. Welcome to all of you. So, from Zambia, we will have the director and CEO of Zambia Qualifications Authority, Miriam Chiaba. She's going to present us the most important features and evolution of Zambia qualifications framework, the role of the authority, and also some interesting information on novelties that are taking place related also with digitalization and e-certificates. From Cabo Verde, we will have Mr. Amilcar Mendes. He is the head of the technical unit of the coordination unit of the National Qualification System. Welcome, Amilcar, to this webinar, and thank you for all the good cooperation we had when we drafted the report, the mapping report. Then Colleen, who is a very dear colleague and very committed in this domain of cooperation on qualifications frameworks, is going to share with us the most recent information on the SADC qualifications framework. Colleen is director for international liaison of SAQA, South African Qualifications Authority. And finally, from the East Africa community, we will have Dr. James Joey. He is the Principal Education Officer, and he's also going to tell us how are things going and developing further with the regional qualifications framework. Thank you, everybody, and I immediately pass the floor to Miriam for her screen sharing. So I stop. Thank you very much. Sorry, we are a little bit delayed because of this initial introduction of participants, but we will catch up. Miriam, would you like to share your screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know whether everybody can see it.
It's not yet shared. You have to use the share screen button, green, and then again, okay, fine, perfect, excellent.
Scan now.
That's very good, Miriam. So
Okay.
you can put in presentation mode if you like, just to be
clear.
But it's also good like that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. The introductions have already been done, so I won't take much of your time. Just to indicate that I'm presenting to you from Zambia, and Zambia is a landlocked country. We are part of the SADC and COMESA region with a population of 18 million people, surrounded with 8 countries. So we just really have to be very friendly, otherwise our qualifications are not going to go anywhere. So basically, we are surrounded with all those countries, as you can see on the screen. And we're based in Lusaka, which is the administrative and economic capital of Zambia. We basically have an education system that is looking at 3 main sectors: the general education that covers early childhood, primary and secondary education. Then we have the TVET, which looks at skills development, and the higher education, which is basically university. The Qualifications Authority was established in 2011 by an act of parliament, but really operations we started in 2014. So one can see that the intention is there, but sometimes the actualization takes quite a bit of time. But what the act did was to establish a qualifications authority, which is governed by a board under the Ministry of Higher Education. And our function is to implement and maintain the qualifications framework, ensure that qualifications are registered and accredited on the framework, and validate qualifications. Over and above that is to ensure that our standards and registered qualifications are internationally comparable. We also maintain a database of learner achievement records. We do have quite a lot of functions, like you are aware of when you are dealing with issues to do with regulatory authorities. You have like 15 responsibilities. So to sum it all, really is what I've basically given. And the National Qualifications Framework, which the Zambia Qualifications Authority is responsible for, was finally developed and agreed in 2016. And it comprehensively covers all learning achievements and pathways. And it is a 10-level qualifications framework made up of a system that comprises the general education, which is one I mentioned to you, the trades and occupations, as well as the higher education sub-framework. So these sub-frameworks basically all work together to ensure that the objectives of the Zambia Qualifications Framework are attained, which is really the objectives of integration, access and mobility, as well as progression and quality, as well as ultimately employment, promoting education, training and employment opportunities. So we see that with the qualifications framework, we've been able to have a national framework for learning achievement that different sectors of the economy can actually speak to, and that people are able to move within and across the framework. You will see that on the screen, I have shared with you the structure of the current qualifications framework, and I do mention current because we're in a review process, and we will share what the thoughts are to that. But currently what we have are 10 levels, as you can see on the screen, and we have from level 1, the primary education certificate, all the way to a doctorate certificate. To coordinate all this is the Qualifications Authority, and the Qualifications Authority is supported by what we have termed as appropriate authorities. These appropriate authorities are quality assurance bodies that are established of Parliament. So, and so these are varied, and I like to just stress this. So under appropriate authorities, you see that there's a varied representation there, not just the typical quality assurance bodies currently. So these are some of the areas that I'll speak to a little bit later on. So this is how our qualifications framework looks like, covering the 3 sub-frameworks: the general education, the trades and occupations sub-framework, and the higher education sub-framework, with the qualifications that are really represented. I'm really highlighting in view of the time allocation that's there, so that we can just have an appreciation. So what we have behind those qualification levels are that each qualification each level has a level descriptor, which is described by a statement of learning achievements known as a level descriptor. The level descriptor basically provides a generic indication of the learning achievements or outcomes that an appropriate qualification at that level is anticipated to have. And these are basically described, they describe the learning outcomes in terms of the foundational competences, or what we normally call the knowledge, the practical skills, and that which somebody can with reflex do, or the applied knowledge, which basically is looking at your autonomy and responsibility and ability to do on reflex the skills that one has acquired. To the level descriptors, to ensure that really what we are doing as the qualifications authority, we coordinate the outputs from the appropriate authorities. Recall I did mention that the quality assurance is managed by the appropriate authorities. So as the qualifications authority, we then coordinate the outputs of the appropriate authorities that are responsible for the 3 sub-frameworks of the ZQF. The appropriate authorities in this case will include the Higher Education Authority, the Technical Education, Vocational Entrepreneurship Training Authority, the Examinations Council of Zambia, and interestingly enough, it also includes training institutions and some professional bodies. And really that's where the discussions started for us to review. But before I go into the review, I just want to show you the roles currently as defined by our Act of Parliament of what these appropriate authorities do. They are basically responsible for managing their own sub-frameworks, the quality assurance for the sub-frameworks. They develop and implement criteria with regard to qualifications in consultation with the qualifications authority, so that everything is well coordinated and things are not happening, outside the framework. They also recommend qualifications or part qualifications for accreditation or registration on the qualifications framework. And they also ensure that the level descriptors are adhered to. So basically, they're the quality assurance arm of the qualifications framework, and they do recommend. What this basically means is that no qualifications will be recognized on the NQF without the recommendation or without being presented by those that are recognized as appropriate authorities. So they play a key role on the qualifications framework. So the issue with the review of the ZQF basically comes from what I have basically shared. I'll just take you a step back. I did show you that the appropriate authorities here include training institutions and professional bodies. So that basically has been an issue of contention, in that really before one becomes a professional, they have to go through a training program. And the role that the training institutions, the professional bodies are playing insofar as quality assurance is concerned, has basically shown that there are some gaps in assuring quality to the expected standards, whereas an institution like the Higher Education Authority would be expected. The emergence of the appropriate authorities, basically looking at professional bodies, was a gap that existed. You know, any education system, if there's a gap that exists, those that want to be comfortable with the quality that is coming out from the education system will now give themselves more responsibilities. So you found that professional bodies were now regulating education and training and not working with education and training providers to do this. So basically, that's one of the aspects why the ZQF is being reviewed. And this is the last point that I've gone to, which is really the review of the recognition of appropriate authorities and to streamline the quality assurance in education and training. Because we've seen that even if the standard has been given, the fact that you have too many people responsible for quality assurance in itself compromises quality. The levels of quality assurance at the higher level should really be left with those responsible for education and training. But overall, the thrust of us reviewing the ZQF has been to respond to the changing training and education demands in the country and ensuring that our qualifications are internationally comparable. One of the things that we faced as Zambia is that we have a schooling system that goes up to O level, and O level is the entry into our universities. But the universities at first year are basically supposed to teach, and they do teach advanced level certificate material. However, the way the education system is that when they finish the first year, then they go into their specialization. The advanced level certification is not recognized. So we do have advanced level material being taught, but recognition is actually not being given. So basically, the country sat down to appreciate that any qualification that basically exists in the international landscape and is operating in Zambia. Of course, we do have some institutions that offer A level, but the overarching body structure, which is the ZQF, has not provided for the A level certificate. And so looking at what is happening internationally and recognizing that our 12th grade at schooling, which is O level, has now got A-level content in there. So initially, the fixing that the different players were doing was to add content. So we're adding content at secondary education and adding content at university that is equivalent to advanced level education without recognizing the certification or the competences that one gained. And so because of that, we have in effect shortchanged our citizens. They are capable, but the recognition, because we've not awarded certificates to confirm that, has not happened. And so that was one of the motivating issues for us to relook the qualifications that are currently catered on the ZQF. And these are the discussions that are currently going on to facilitate for advanced level qualifications, same as bachelor honors degrees, because the way the recognition was done was basically based on award, what somebody was awarded. And so there's been that discussion that is going on with respect to reviewing the ZQF. Another aspect is the implementation of a credit accumulation and transfer system. This is basically, as Zambia, we use the one credit equivalent to 10 notional hours. But then in terms of translation and when we want for mobility purposes, we are increasingly seeing that when you use notional hours independently without much reference to the credits. When you are talking of issues of mobility and so on, the award owners get affected because they have to refer back. Whereas if it is an established system that is working, then that is basically something that is well appreciated. And so this review is to also bring into account and to also reflect the credit hours. And with the review currently where we are at is, this is the proposal. Cabinet approved in principle, but it's still under consultation. So what I'm showing you is still work in progress, almost there, but with a lot of discussions. One, you will see definitely that the structure has changed, because the earlier one, we were having misconceptions that everybody thought once you get to level 2B, which was our ordinary level, that you couldn't go into university. I'll just quickly show you the current structure and just explain that a little bit more. Yeah, so when you get to this, the O-level secondary education, others, when you just look at it here, unless you provided progression paths, one would just think that you can only go to a level 3 under the trades and occupations incrementally. So we had a bit of challenge explaining all that. So it was just felt that through stakeholder consultations, that the structure also needed to change. And this is basically what we are currently looking at. We've taken provision for the primary and secondary education there. We've taken recognition of, we had skill awards. These are people that are competent in a number of skill areas, but because our framework did not make, even though the Act made provision for partial qualifications, we actually did not operationalize that. So we're finding that people were getting shortchanged, those that were doing shorter period or shorter duration skill or occupational certifications. So that has been taken care of. And we have the diplomas, and the other key one to look at is the graduate certificates, the graduate diplomas, and the honors diplomas there. So basically, that's the way that we foresee this to be looking like, still 10 levels. However, the main change here, you'll recall that I did indicate that we had the quality assurance that covered training institutions, professional bodies, and anyone that had an act. But now the quality assurance, basically recognition will be placed in the Ministry of General Education, the relevant authorities there for TVETA and higher education. So this basically is to streamline the role of quality assurance, and also just to focus the professional bodies to do that which they do better, which is to manage the professional practice and not the training itself. One of the things that we've been working on as the ZQF to ensure comparability and also mobility, and in line with what is going on within our region, we started the alignment of the ZQF to the SADC ZQF. We had reached an advanced stage, but the process has been held pending review of the ZQF. I must indicate that the transition period for implementation of the ZQF is until 2021 January, end of January. So the uptake of reviewed qualifications actually took longer because there's been a lot of capacity building and so on. Even though learning programs, some more learning programs have been accredited under the Higher Education Authority, we tended to find that those now making a progression to the ZQF, the National Qualifications Framework, took a little bit longer. And basically, at the moment, we do have about 106 registered qualifications. more learning programs, but that is really the business of the quality assurance bodies that are responsible for the particular sub-frameworks before they can bring them to the ZQF. We see that this list will increase definitely by the end of December, because we are already in the pipeline and approving quite a lot of qualifications in readiness for the final launch of the end of the transition period. It was a 3-year period in which training institutions, awarding bodies had to align their qualifications and ensure consistency with the qualifications framework. Another development that I just wanted to share briefly with you is the Qualifications Management Information System and the e-certificate that we launched in June 2020. All our services are offered via this system. Of course, it has a few glitches here and there, but we're glad that we were able to launch it, and we've processed a few qualifications through this platform. That is mainly for the validation and evaluation service. We can do your applications, you can do your submission of learner records as an awarding body once you are recognized and given the rights. So this is something that you can actually see, log in, set your account, regardless of who you are on the system, and engage with the system. I will share basically how this system integrates. Basically talks to the quality assurance bodies and those that appropriate authorities that are quality assurance for them to submit the qualifications for registration on the ZQF, the appropriate authorities for them to give us who the qualification orders, and basically our staff will process the information. You can also make your bank transfers and payments online. A qualification holder can submit their qualification for verification and accreditation online, and all that will happen. And we are glad that this happened when we were at the peak of the COVID. So a number of qualification applications came through that. And on the screen right now, I'm sharing with you an e-certificate validation of qualification that basically shows you how this comes out. This qualification is issued, this certificate is issued after we have successfully confirmed that your qualification is authentic. This is for verification purposes. It is real time, and you can see that our colleague Privisil developed this for us. Thanks to Privisil, I think Stephen Logan is in here, but this is thanks to the initiative through the SADC qualifications TCCA, the Technical Committee on Certification and Accreditation. We have a project, and we are now issuing these qualifications. They're real time, they have security features embedded in there, and if for any forgeries or anything, an employer or any user has the access to print this certificate and will be able to know whether indeed a person who has come for verification has also faked the recognition certificate. So basically what this assures, it assures you that what you have is a real verification certificate. The role that we play in recognition of prior learning, just to share, is that we develop the policy and criteria for recognition of prior learning, and this is given to the appropriate authorities. As the qualifications authority, we also offer implementation support, but the implementation of recognition of prior learning is effected at training delivery level. The other aspect to share with you is national occupational standards. So I'm basically touching a few issues that we do to inform the qualifications framework. We commenced development of national occupational standards. Basically, this is used in the development of curriculum and learning programs. We had an issue which continues, that the outcomes of our education system do not match the desires of industry. So the occupational standards basically inform what industry is looking for. So these will ensure that curricula and learning programs are tailored to the aspirations of key stakeholders, mainly industry who use the outcomes of the education sector. So to date, we've developed 12 occupational standards, and we hope to launch probably another 18 before the end of the year. So we've looked at the tourism sector, aquaculture, and agriculture. This is a development phase. It's a very expensive exercise, but we've started, and we hope. And the whole idea is that as training providers, awarding bodies are now bringing qualifications for recognition, the main input to ensure currency of what we are training will be derived from the occupational standards. So this is an initiative that we've been doing. I've spoken about the credit accumulation and transfer system, basically to ease local, regional, and international mobility in the education and training system. One intervention that we also have done as ZACO, we're proud to have been the first African country to pilot this initiative, which is the UNESCO Qualifications Passport. This is basically in line with the provisions in the revised Addis Ababa Convention and the Global Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications that basically deals with the practical application of the provisions for refugees and displaced persons. Basically what this does is you are able to assess an individual who does not have paper documentation to confirm whether what they have is authentic. And so this pilot project was initiated and conducted last year in 2019 in one of our refugee resettlements, Mehera. We had 61 applications, most of who came from DRC. Where the official language is French. So this gave us a bit of a challenge because my staff don't speak French. Currently now they are even being capacity built in French, but working with UNESCO and Norway, NOKUT, we were able to issue 11 passports. And a lot of interlinkages and collaborations are happening. But what we've seen is that it is actually practical to award somebody without paper documentation or with paper documentation that you are not able to actually confirm directly from the awarding body. So this is the UQP project, basically taking the lessons from the European qualifications passport. And the impact of COVID, last but not the least, this basically hit us all very negatively. Negative as slow or non-responsive, responses to verification requests, both locally and internationally, as institutions closed and suspended. We had to suspend activities until we started gaining ground. We saw that in the education sector here in Zambia, from March to September, we basically had shut down. Even though e-learning was promoted, but this was something new, and we saw that a lot of schools had to learn. So all exit qualifications have been held. Examination classes resumed in June, but the non-examination classes only resumed in September. Obviously, there's an impact. How do we recognize qualifications that half the year you did not actually have learning going on? And so the government of Zambia has extended the learning period to next year. So the term ends next year, but basically what future considerations we are looking at is to make alternative learning and assessment methods a part and parcel of our lives, such that as qualifications authority, also to look at how then we recognize these qualifications that are impacted by issues that are beyond us. And so therefore it means that we need to look at innovative approaches of achieving learning outcomes. This is an ongoing discussion, and hopefully in the future, we will be able to share how this has panned out. So my colleagues, this is where I end. This is the Zambia Qualifications Authority. I will just update this to give the link to our website, but we are available online, and we'll answer any questions at the end as we continue to share. With that, Eduarda, I end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for this wonderfully prepared presentation, for all the insights you shared also about the evolution and the debate around all the issues that justify the work you are doing now to update and improve a number of aspects of the qualifications framework and its governance. Thank you very much. I'd like immediately to ask our colleague Amilcar to share his screen. I think he is thank you. Amilcar, vai apresentar.
Amilcar, please, will you make your presentation now?
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good, excellent. Thank you. Pode pôr no primeiro. Pode pôr no primeiro. So Amilcar from Cabo Verde is now going to share the experience of this framework. This experience is already 10 years old, let's say, and the framework is part of the national qualification system, as you will see, and the legislation has been revised and updated now in 2020. Thank you very much, Amilcar. I would like just to tell colleagues, please write your questions and comments in the chat box so that we can provide the replies during the questions and answers session. Thank you. Obrigada, Amilcar.
Thank you, Amilcar. You have the floor.
Thank you. Unmute.
Okay. Amilcar, please unmute your mic. Are you listening now? Can you hear us?
Antes de mais, bom dia ou boa tarde a todos.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amilcar Menz. I'm part of the technical team from the National Qualification Framework from Cape Verde. Before, allow me to thank the African Union Commission and everyone behind this project, as well as Dr. Eduarda for this project, and also for the invitation extended to Cape Verde to join you today and make this presentation. I would like to greet Dr. Olavo Correa, who is now in Angola, but he helped us a great deal in establishing our national qualification framework. And also, before I start, let me tell you what Cape Verde is and its context. When it comes to the geographic location, we are an island, and we have 10 islands, volcanic islands in the Atlantic Ocean. Our capital is Praia City, and we are at 650 kilometers away from Dakar, Senegal. This is where we are located. Now, economically,
crescimento muito do produto interno muito três setores: o turismo, a indústria, a pesca.
Our main activity is tourism and trade. tourism is the sector that has contributed a great deal for our economy and is very important, as you can realize, to our economy. Tourism represents 23% of our GDP, and with the COVID now we are severely affected in our economy. Now I will begin the presentation, but before I begin, I would like to say that the main topics are the following. I will address the milestones, the main milestones in this process, and how this framework was established, the characteristics, the structure of our education system, level descriptors in the presentation, legal frameworks that were adopted, major challenge that we have been faced with, and I will also say something about the impact of COVID-19 in this process. Now, with regard to the milestones, in 2009, the process in 2009 to 2010, under the reforms of our education and training system, we established the National Coordination Unit, this with the aim in order to establish the national qualification system. And the national qualification system in the structure. Our national qualification system has been there for 10 years. It was created in 2010. In 2013, we had the legal regime for the accreditation of training institutions. This in order to regulate and ensure quality in the process. In 2018, we had the review of the national qualification system and the legal framework and adopted the regulation on the organization of the UCSNQ. But then, now, in 2020, we had the new legal framework for the catalog of national qualification and national qualification framework. Of the catalog, national catalog of qualification and national qualification framework. These are the milestones that were involved since we began the creation of national qualification framework. Now, the purpose of national qualification framework establishment, as I mentioned, it was established in 2010, but it included many pillars of national education system, and the objective was to ensure access, mobility, quality of learning, and mobility. These are the main objectives. This includes basic education, secondary education, tertiary education, and professional training. And it includes recognition and validation of prior learning. I'm sorry, we are having a bit of a challenge understanding Cape Verde. Could we kindly ask the speaker to get closer to the microphone? The sound keeps disappearing, please. The framework was created in, I'm sorry, we are under political campaigns. That's why we are having too much noise outside. That is why the interpreters are not able to follow with that noise.
Promover o acesso, a progressão e a qualidade das qualificações prestadas em Cabo Verde. Também dos aspectos muito importantes que é promover a validação das aprendizagens não formais e formais.
Eduardo, please.
Permitindo nesse caso a integração dos cidadãos ao mercado de trabalho e às aprendizagens contínuas. Então é muito importante a criação de quadro, foi muito importante nesse sentido também. Vai permitir a validação das aprendizagens não formais e informais.
We also aim at the validation of prior learning through this system. We also have another objective, which is to promote the cooperation between the European Qualification Framework and with other frameworks. Since we are members of ECOWAS, and we also have a special partnership with the European Union. Therefore, we aim at this cooperation between our frameworks. One of the main objectives, or one of the main objective as well, is in order to ensure transparency, comparability of our national qualifications as well.
Quais são as principais características do quadro nacional de qualificações de Cabo Verde?
What are the main characteristics, main components of national qualification system? Our national qualification framework has got four main characteristics. Our national qualification framework includes all the education systems that I mentioned. Therefore, it must be inclusive. And all the education systems are included. Now, it also allows qualification through validation of prior learning and other components. So we have two ways of inclusion. Another characteristic, it must be its integration. It must integrate all the learning modalities available in Cape Verde, and it must integrate three competence dimensions: level descriptors that define the National Catalogue of Qualification, and we have knowledge, skills, and attitudes. These are included as well. We also have articulation because we must integrate all the levels of qualifications in our national qualification framework. each qualification level is defined by learning outcomes. Therefore, the importance of this articulation. We also have as the main characteristic value in order to value formal and informal training and non-formal training. Our national qualification framework, it's a structural component in our national qualification system, and it's articulated with other components that are part of our national qualification system. For instance, it's articulated with our national qualification catalog, because the qualification under the catalog are defined based on level descriptors that are included in our national qualification framework. It's articulated with our credit system, because we have a system that allows that includes transfer of qualifications and accumulation as well. Another instrument is the individual register of qualifications and competencies. All competencies that our citizen will acquire throughout their life must be registered. We have a database for that, and this must allow them to continue their training and the competencies that they are missing in order to have their qualification formalized. We also have another component which is monitoring, evaluation, and quality assurance. This is necessary. We have to monitor and evaluate the education that is provided under the system. But also, we have recognition, validation, and competence certification. This is very much related with the framework, because normally the level descriptors that are defined through learning outcomes, and if we look at that, then this instrument can recognize the competencies that were acquired throughout their life. Now, the structure of our national education system in Cape Verde. We have six subsystems. We have pre-primary education with then we have the primary education, 8 years divided by 2. Then we have the secondary education, which is 4 years with 2 alternatives. We have the technical side and the general education. We also have a subsystem of university education with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. And under these subsystems, we do have other courses, professional courses, which without any degree, a bachelor's degree, and these are also taught under the system, but you are not awarded any degree. But we also have other options. For instance, we do have adult education, and We do have continuous education. We do have the validation and recognition of other competencies. And we do have another component of training for the development of necessary skills for particular profession, including continuous training under the same system. Each one of these subsystems, you can be awarded a diploma or certificate. In secondary school, for instance, you do have the technical diploma or the general diploma that, depending on the case, we have the academic and the professional side, and we do have another alternative for the education of youth and adults. All these can lead to university education, where one can acquire and be awarded with a master's degree, PhD, or a honors degree. Now, what is the structure level of each levels? Our framework has got 8 levels. We do have the first one at a basic mandatory education diploma, and we have the highest, which is doctorate. I won't go into detail, but you can see all of them from 1 to 8. These are the levels of National Qualification Framework. Now, level descriptors. All the levels are defined on the basis of 3 level of descriptors. We do have knowledge. We also have skills, know-how, and aptitudes and responsibilities. Perdemos o contacto com o orador. These are the level descriptors that allow us to define the levels in our framework, of our framework. Still under level descriptors, for each one of them, from the most basic to the more complex, we have them all defined in terms of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Each one of each level is described here in this table. The most basic level here in terms of knowledge must be basic general knowledge applied to a limited and defined set of activities. These are the main aspects that we think are important, but to level 2, basic operational knowledge of a field of work or study, etc. And as we go further, we go deep into the level descriptors. This is how we define the descriptors. Main entities in Cape Verde, since our national qualification catalog has already been defined on the basis of these descriptors. We still, however, we still have some entities that think that by increasing the time and content that is taught, we can increase the level of the descriptor. This is what we are trying to do. The work is ongoing. We are training all the trainers on the basis of the catalogs in order for them to take all these important elements and ensure quality in the implementation and in the qualification. We also have, I explained previously, therefore I won't dwell much on this. Now, the legal framework. As I said, our national qualification framework is related to many regulations. We do have the Decree 62/2009, which approved the organization, the structural organization of Ministry of Labor and Professional Training. This was because in 2009, we wanted to define and implement our national qualification framework on the basis of this regulation. We also do have the Decree 6/2013. This is the regulation that allows each teaching institutions and entities for these institutions to be able to provide education must be registered, and they are registered under this regulation and decree. At all levels, all the entities must be registered, and this is the regulation that we use that allows for that. We also have the Decree 53/2014 establishing the legal framework for professional training, which is very much related to the regulations that I also mentioned under our national qualification framework. And we do have the Decree 13/18, which amends the national education law. And these are the legal instruments that are related to our national qualification framework. Now, the governance of our national qualification framework. The governance is ensured by our national qualification framework through the Decree 7/2018, which ensure the management and the governance of the whole structure. And also, we do have also, as part of the governance structure, we do have the training institutions and the services that ensure technical education. We do have two governing structure, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Finance. And these are the entities that are in charge of the whole system and structure. The governance of other structures such as professional training and the National Council of Labor, Employment and Professional Training, which includes other entities that are competent in their specific areas. The structure of our qualifications. The structure of our professional qualifications. We do have the professional profile, which is the referential of required competencies. It's a referential of required competencies. For instance, this is what is used for the recognition of the competencies, people that must prove to possess these competencies in order to have this profile. But we also have the training program in order to obtain the required competencies that are necessary for the training referential.
O programa de formação é a forma de obter as competências. Então, através do
training program is the way by which we acquire.
Então, basicamente é assim que a nossa qualificação profissional está estruturada.
Basically, this is how the whole catalog is structured.
Dentro do perfil profissional, o nosso perfil profissional é constituído por conjunto.
Under the professional profile, we do have units of competence. Each competence unity will allow for the training module under the training plan. Will find the module. This is how it was divided based on what is available in the units of competence. Within the units of competence, we do have the elements of performance and competence and criteria for the acquisition of such competences. And we do have a set of learning outcomes that must be acquired by the students.
Nós temos aqui também a questão dentro da formação.
Under the training as well, we do have.
Ele tem carácter muito flexível.
Since the catalog is very flexible, we have a system, a module system. Somebody can
dos módulos, ou então, se não
have a full qualification through these modules. But if they do not conclude the entire training, they can go through a partial qualification depending on the modules that they will have learned. Then, whenever they have time, they can conclude and have full qualification. Therefore, our framework is very flexible in the certification process. Now, when it comes to access and progression, in secondary system for progression to university level, people under this system must conclude the secondary education in order to enroll for university. Only by concluding the secondary education, you can either access university or professional training. Now, university education. we may have access to polytechnic education, master's, PhD, etc. Under the university education, we also have professional university education, allowing people under this system to acquire competencies that can be transferred for the award of an honors degree or a bachelor degree. Actually, it does not allow for the award of honors degree or bachelor degree, but you can get the credits, allowing you to get to that later on. As I was saying, it allows you to acquire the credits that will allow you to. Amilcar, are you listening, please? When it comes to professional training, access is based on prerequisites. For instance, for somebody to enter to level 2, you don't need a prerequisites, you just enroll. To acquire a level 3 qualification, you must have standard 8 at least. To enter to level 4, you must have concluded standard 10. To access level 5, you must have concluded standard 12 education so to have access. This is the issue of access and progression. Also, at level 4 and level 5, these trainings allow access to university education. One of the main challenges at professional training is the credit system that we are now trying to establish. And I believe that with the credit system, we can enhance mobility between professional training and university education. We have started this work with the regulatory entity.
Amilcar, consegue ouvir-me?
And the process is ongoing. Now, with regard to the credit system, here in Cape Verde, we have this system in the university education, and these credits allow for the mobility of students and the recognition of prior learning and life learning. Now, as I mentioned, the legal instruments allow for the accumulation and transfer of credits. This is ongoing. The system allowing for this is ongoing. And under the university education, credits are equivalent to 25 or 30 hours of schooling. This includes the hours of contact, self-learning, projects, labs, assessment, etc. One curricular year is equivalent to 60 credits, and one semester is equivalent to 30 credits, and this has already defined under the regulation for university education. Now, when it comes to quality assurance, we do have many legal frameworks that ensure quality. On the training side, we do have a legal framework for accreditation of institutions. Before this was done, the governance previously was done under a different structure, but with this legal framework, it was now done by the institutions that I mentioned.
Estou a falar muito rápido.
Temos que terminar. Temos que terminar.
Ok, muito bem.
Mais 2 minutos
Please, you have to
terminar.
conclude, Amilcar. You have 2 more minutes, please. You have to conclude. Quality assurance is also done jointly by the entities managing the National Qualification Catalog.
Quadro Nacional de Qualificações.
And we do have the legal framework 10/2020 of the National Qualification Framework. One is the catalog and the other one is the framework.
Por exemplo, com os componentes das qualificações profissionais.
We also do have
das unidades de
the
competência
component professional
os modos
qualification, the format, structure, competence unity, and training modules.
A nível do ensino básico e secundário.
Basic education and education. Quality is ensured under the National Education Directorate through the Decree 10/. Now, when it comes to university education, we also have another structure that ensures quality through the Decree
8/2016, que cria a agência
121/8/2016 that will establish the regulatory entity for university education and its statutes. Quality is also ensured under the Decree 20/2012, which is the legal framework for the university teaching institutions. Apologies, we are faced with many challenges to hear the speaker. The sound keeps going. Now, with regard to the recognition and validation of experiences and competence, access. In order to access, you must have at least 5 years of professional experience. And minimum age 25 years. This process is done under the Decree 54/2014, 22 September, and we do have a number of decrees under this framework, under this process. we do have the decree 20/2010 for the national qualification system.
Pelo decreto-lei número
we have the decree 65/2010 for national qualification framework. This was the basis for the recognition and validation of competencies, skills and competencies. Decree for professional training, which is 53/2014, and we have the legal framework for the catalog, which is 62/2010. And we have methodology of designing and certifying professionals. These are the main framework and
o próprio também
was based.
Número 54/2014 que regula o sistema de reconhecimento, validação e certificação de competências.
For the validation and certification of competences.
Nós, no início eu falei que agora nós podemos obter uma qualificação
I mentioned that now one can acquire qualifications, certification through two paths.
Passar por um processo de formação e obter certificado, tendo as competências, obter certificado. Ou então,
in order to acquire the competence and acquire a certification, you can go through the process of a validation and certification of professional qualification, or the certification of professional qualification through modules and units.
Validação e certificação de professores profissionais, as unidades de competências, onde é elaborado guias de evidências, que depois para obtenção da certificação da qualificação. Caso
evidence guide that is necessary in order to acquire the certification of professional qualification. And one may not prove competencies in all the necessary fields, and they can go now be directed to the entities, appropriate entities, to acquire knowledge in the specific fields where they're lacking competence, or else, or rather, through working experience, they can go back and acquire such competences and then come and move.
Nós temos alguns desafios muito importantes. Desde 2010 já estamos a implementar o quadro nacional de qualificações, mas ainda
since 2010 we are implementing our national qualification.
Estamos a trabalhar para as vencer.
As I mentioned, and
com a implementação do sistema de profissional, porque
we are now implementing the credit system in the professional training and allowing for mobility between the subsystems. This system is in place already, the credit system.
E também outro grande desafio tem a ver com o desenvolvimento de pacto nacional.
Another challenge is the national pact that will bring together all the subsystems, basic, secondary, technical, professional, and higher education, in order to
da CDAO.
To interconnect our national framework together with the one from COAS and the European Union.
Vem que o nosso quadro de qualificação em termos dos diferentes.
Although our national qualification framework, when it comes to the levels, and although this is already matching the one from the European Union already. Amilcar, could you conclude, please? Please, you have to conclude.
Temos que terminar, Amilcar.
Bom, em relação às medidas de combate à pandemia do Covid-19.
When it comes to
o estado de emergência foi decretado no dia 20 de março.
COVID-19. After we identified our first cases, the lockdown was created in 20 March. Guidance and recommendations were published and enforced. We had to all teaching institutions.
Regulamento que estabelece as regras e procedimentos para a prevenção do contágio à pandemia nas entidades.
And we had to implement in order to prevent COVID-19 in all entities.
Nesse caso,
we having online classes, and we started using
canais Grims Studio, no canal aberto, no Zap, quer dizer, foram utilizados vários meios para que os nossos formandos, os nossos alunos pudessem obter as suas aulas. Aos alunos com necessidade educativa especial foram transmitidas, as aulas foram transmitidas com tradução gestual e também foram enviadas fichas em braille, em braille para que pudessem auxiliar nos seus estudos. Foi suspenso a realização das provas da avaliação final dos quartos, sextos, sétimo, oitavo.
We had lost connection with the speaker.
Com exceção das provas de recurso, que foi aplicado já num regime excepcional, tomando todas as medidas de segurança que se impõem.
Exceptionally, we had to make sure safety measures were enforced, and
do quarto ano até o oitavo ano.
Education,
e também no ensino secundário
connection with the speaker, from standard 9 to standard 10.
And up to the secondary level, and by complying with all the conditions that are asked of from the Ministry of Health. And then for those who end with the teachings, there have been examinations, and
in some cases we had face-to-face classes in order to prepare the students for the tests and examination following health guidelines.
Online para dar.
We also had webinars in order to allow training for teachers in the use of digital materials, digital learning alternatives.
Outro instrumento, foi criado também outro instrumento muito importante que foi a regulação da formação.
We also created the distance training or remote training and teaching, and we had to also draft in order to ensure this process. Our legal, our previous legal framework did not provide for this kind of teaching. Therefore, it had to be drafted and enforced. This is what we did in general when it comes to challenges that we were faced with when it comes to COVID-19. Well, further details about whatever I said can be found in the link that I shared, and you may access all information available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amilcar, for this very detailed, comprehensive presentation in which you have presented the various pillars, components of the national qualification system, their interconnections, and a lot of detail about the legislative framework underpinning the system. Thank you very much. We are now quite delayed with our agenda, and therefore I will suggest the following. We continue with the questions and answers. We have a number of questions on the chat box, and it's important to reply. And then we, let's say, dedicate maximum 10 minutes, and then we immediately go to the last two presentations, and we skip
we can't hear you, Eduarda. We can't hear you.
Okay. So, English, correct?
Eduarda, we can hear you. I think maybe Colleen has some problem because I could hear you fine.
Okay. And now, do you hear me? Yes? Do you hear me, Erika?
Yes, yes, from my side, yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Eduarda, I can also hear you.
I can
Okay,
hear
thank
you.
you so much. Thank you. So since we are very delayed with our agenda today, let us then continue with questions and answers. And there are a number of questions on the chat box. I took note. For example, a question from Mrs. Jahufal to Miriam about the progression path for higher national diploma graduates. There was also a question from Namibia about articulation challenges from TVET to higher education. And if you don't mind, another question that was on the chat box for Miriam, national occupational standards, how was the development done? So there was a question also from Fiona from Seychelles about the qualifications passport and whether the qualifications level appear, but Miriam already replied. Miriam, would you have now the possibility to reply in 2 minutes, if you don't mind, short, to these three questions? Progression path, challenges in articulation, TVET to higher education, and also a few words about the development of national occupational standards. And then I will come back to Amilcar with also some questions that are in the chat box for him.
Okay, thanks a lot, Eduardo. And just quickly, the response on the progression for for us, it's a diploma. So a person can actually just go into the higher education sub-framework, basically to pursue a bachelor's degree. And that is what is currently available. But with the review, we're basically looking at alternative bachelor degrees. But from the diploma, that is the progression that is there. With respect to the National Occupational Standards Development, basically the process involved us initially looking at information that is available on occupational profiles within the country. Where it wasn't available, we had to determine the occupational profiles within and outside the country rather, as the qualifications authority, because the responsibility to determine those standards lies with us. And then we put together representatives from the specific sectors. So like for the tourism, we called initially we called all the stakeholders in the tourism sector, and they determined which occupations needed to be worked on so that there's priority in what was firstly being worked on and the areas that needed to be covered. Arising from that, the experts then worked on the submissions from the stakeholder consultations and also from general consultations that were being held. After that was developed, we then circulated the drafts locally to key stakeholders for comments, and it came back for validation, went back. We also engaged some regional counterparts. We sent to all our stakeholders, both within and outside. We have a few institutions that we engage in the relevant sectors and also in education and training. The stakeholders included everybody from industry as well as from the training provision and regulation side. After that consultative back and forth and the development of the standards, then we did the launch. So basically that's the process. It's more consultative, including all the stakeholders. I think on the UQP, I did address that. The only thing I didn't address was the level. The UQP is a document that is issued well, with UNESCO. It's a UNESCO qualifications passport. Basically, the qualifications authority that does the assessment and works with UNESCO is recognized on the award. What it issues is basically showing the highest assessed qualification of the holder. So it will show what the highest achieved qualification of the holder is, and in that country, and then the qualification authority will then have to do their evaluation for recognition purposes. So because it is it's an international mobility tool that one can move anywhere. It's not an assessed tool based on the Zambian qualifications. It's an assessment basically that determines what this person actually has as a qualification that they have presented. The level is not indicated so that the qualification authority can then assess the qualification which is stated on this qualification passport, and they then can issue their respective recognition certificate. So for ZAQA would then have to issue a different qualification recognition, which is the same like we issue for anyone. It's then assessed in that line. I hope that is clear. Otherwise, I'll be available to answer any more questions directly to my email.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Then we have a couple of questions to Amilcar. Amilcar, está-me a ouvir? I have the impression that somehow... Amilcar, consegue ouvir-me? Sim? Amilcar, está a ouvir-me?
Estou.
Ok, obrigada. Amilcar. So, há umas perguntas para si. E eu queria fazer a seguinte proposta. Há perguntas que...
Não estou a ouvir.
Não, ok. And now... Consegue ouvir-me?
Não. Está muito, o som está muito baixo.
Sim. Ok. So I will speak like this and maybe you hear through the interpreters in Portuguese.
Não.
Directly. Is the sound
Agora sim. Estamos a ter corte.
Okay, so there are some questions coming from Guinea-Bissau. about the process of development of the National Qualifications Framework in Cabo Verde. I would suggest that we leave those questions for the end of the workshop, and Elísio can stay online.
Estou a ouvir através da tradução em francês, pode dizer, talvez eu possa entender.
E a tradução em português não tem? Pode escolher também em português.
Ok, vou tirar a talvez é porque eu tenho se ligar, vou desligar. Ok, tente agora.
Ok.
Agora estou a ouvir.
Tá, ok. I will speak in Portuguese just to be quick. Está a ouvir-me em português?
Sim, sim, estou.
Há umas perguntas da Guiné-Bissau e eu vou pedir para deixarmos essas perguntas para o final do webinar. Porque são perguntas acerca do desenvolvimento do quadro em Cabo Verde. Let us now reply, please, to one very interesting question that is on the chat box, and it is, which were the challenges you faced between 2010 and 2020 with the National Qualifications Framework? Which challenges did you face and how did you address? This is a question from Cameroon. And another question interesting is concerns the use of the units of competence and related modules. So the question is this approach of units of competence and modules, is this used everywhere in the education or only in technical vocational education? That's a question also from in the chat box. So two questions for you. Units of competence and related modules, is this applied in all levels of education, like general education, TVET, or also in technical vocational education, or only in technical vocational education? Plus the question about what were the main challenges you had from 2010 to 2020 in the construction, implementation of the National Qualifications Framework? Two questions. And then reply in Portuguese.
Posso?
Pode sim, pode.
Olha, eu não percebi bem a segunda pergunta.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I did not understand the question.
Todas as estruturas, que não, por exemplo, na formação.
But the training outcomes are all defined. In the professional training, we do have that structure, and all qualifications are included. Learning outcomes are included. We do have that structure, but the challenge is to carry out the same work when it comes to education and university education, which is not yet included.
Quais foram os principais desafios? Os dois, três principais desafios, problemas que tiveram em Cabo Verde do quadro nacional das qualificações. Entre 2010 e 2020. O que foi mais difícil? É para as pessoas, para os países que estão
2020, between that period, what was the major challenge? Because countries that are still under the establishment process, they need to learn from you. Well, first of all, you must have a strategy, and the political strategy at the highest level, and political will in order to embark in the process. With this vision and this commitment at the highest level of the government, then we had to establish a set of activities that were to be carried out in order to create and implement.
Ver as experiências das várias dos vários países que
we also had
que
to
já
acquire experiences from us
tivemos
that had already embarked in the same process
na implementação, que é o caso de Portugal, o caso de Espanha, e também temos vários outros países que
we shared experiences with many assisted us in our process, for instance, in other countries. Therefore, that coordination, that partnership is very important. And you must be able to articulate the main activity, components, and actors that are involved in the process. They must be able to come together and define all the activities.
do Sistema Nacional de Qualificações, eu cheguei aqui, já estou muito mais
My colleague who is attending maybe can address this question more specifically, but this is what I can say
So
for
we
now.
will now continue.
Thank you.
Our agenda, and then I would like to invite immediately Colleen, please, to share her screen and present then the most important features and developments related with the SADC qualification framework. Thank you. Obrigada, Amilcar.
I hope everyone can see. I'm not going to put my video on because I think you can focus on the presentation. Here at the bottom, you will find the link to the SADC Secretariat website. So I'm going to, my presentation is going to be brief. Most of you have already know about the SADC qualifications framework. So I'm going to be talking about the context and implementation, then the implications and opportunities, and lastly, a strategy. So this is the SADC region. We've got 16 member states, and the languages are French, Portuguese, and English. And let me also highlight that translations, they are a challenge. Most of the documents are in English, and we do find that the French and the Portuguese member states, they don't always have access to translations. So the purpose of the SADC qualifications framework, it's mostly about mobility. It's about having the qualification and being able to use it in the SADC region and outside of SADC. And then also it provides information and transparency on the qualifications of the member states in the country. It comprises all three sectors, which is not the same as because I've seen the East African qualifications framework, it's only higher education, but the SADC qualifications framework comprises schooling, higher education, and technical and vocational education and training. I'm not going to go through the details of the slide, but just to show you that this SADC qualifications framework started way back in 1997 when the SADC protocol on education and training was signed. And then a number of steps took place. There was a lot of research that was done. Regional quality assurance guidelines were developed. In 2011, the SADC qualifications framework was approved. And then you can see a bit of a gap between 2011 and 2016. Almost nothing happened. And let me highlight a second challenge there. When you have a regional qualifications framework, you need to have capacity to drive it, and you also need to have financial resources. So we kind of revitalized the SADC qualifications framework, and we managed to get it back on track. And in 2017, we had a launch of the SADC qualifications framework. And we also launched a program of the SADC qualifications framework, which is linked to verification So we launched a SADC qualifications verification network. We started an alignment pilot, and in 2019, 2 countries completed the alignment. In 2020, Mauritius completed a first draft of the alignment report, and currently alignment is being rolled out to all SADC countries. So I wanted to show you when we started, when we kind of revamped in 2016, when we got together, we looked at what we had. At that time, we only had 15 member states. Comoros has come on board recently. So we had a SADC qualifications framework with 10 levels. We had quality assurance guidelines, and we had level descriptors. And we decided that the model that we would use was, we would ask member states to develop the NQFs, align it to the SADC qualifications framework, and then also align their quality assurance with the regional quality assurance guidelines that were available. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we set up a SADC qualifications verification network, because it's no good having good quality assurance mechanisms, but when the learner leaves the country, there is nobody to verify that that learner actually has that qualification. And our motto was building trust. So that is how we felt that we could build trust in qualifications received in SADC. This is the latest model, implementation model. So you see, we started off with 3, which was alignment, quality assurance, and verifications. And then we realized that there are other elements as well. We needed to have a governance component, because meetings need to take place. There needs to be documentation, translations, communication with member states. So we added the governance component. We also added advocacy and communication, and part of that is, you know, developing these materials and telling people about the SADC qualifications framework and what it can do. And then we also, because we had regional, we had a recognition of prior learning, we had regional guidelines. We thought that that should also be a program of the SADC qualifications framework. So we've got another program for RPL, credit accumulation and transfer and articulation. Then, because we really wanted this framework to move forward, and as I said, a challenge is that we don't have the capacity, and there's no resources, there's no financial and human resources. So we decided that for each of these 6 components, we will volunteer countries to kind of drive these components. So you see there, South Africa driving alignment, Botswana driving quality assurance, Eswatini driving verifications, Namibia driving RPL, CAT and articulation, Zambia driving advocacy and communication, and then the governance component, that would be undertaken by the SADC Secretariat and the Technical Committee on Certification and Accreditation. Now, this TCCA, they were originally set up to implement the SADC qualifications framework. So that was our model. The long-term vision is that either the transcript or the qualification award should have the qualification level of the regional qualifications framework on the transcript, so that you can see it could be NQF level 8 in the country, and it's also aligned with the SADC-QF level 8. Then we also said, for this to happen, we need some kind of standards. So we said a SADC recognition manual. That is what we need to assist people to do these evaluations when someone comes with a qualification from another SADC member state. Now, the focus areas of the SADC qualifications framework. So number 1, we are saying that, you know, we need to build capacity for people to develop their national qualifications frameworks or their national qualification systems. And we can see that this ACQF network is a very good way to develop that. Then we're also saying that quality assurance systems and structures need to be developed, and also there needs to be capacity to deliver on the quality assurance mandates. Then the verification, we said verification is important, so we need to develop some policies around how qualifications from other countries will be recognized. And then we also need credible, transparent qualifications information infrastructure. So we felt that, you know, people need to build that in their countries. Now, this is also in line with the ADIS Convention, which became active on the 15th of December 2019, and it's also in line with the Global Convention prescripts. So in terms of the opportunities, we developed this 10 alignment criteria, and we piloted with 8 countries. Now you can see during the pilot process, we changed some of the wording of the alignment criteria. And as I explained previously, 2 countries finished. And there are a number of challenges as to why countries are struggling to finish. One of it being COVID, and they are unable to meet, and so on. The SADC qualifications framework has level descriptors. These are the competencies, knowledge, skills, and autonomy and responsibility. And when you heard Miriam's presentation, she said that these are the same competencies that they are developing in the revised NQF. We also had a learning outcomes seminar in June last year, where we invited some of the SADC members to speak as well, so that we could have some kind of focus on learning outcomes and what they are. There is also an international handbook on learning outcomes, and we've done some analysis on what learning outcomes are available in SADC countries, but still a lot of research needs to be done. So the analysis focused mainly on the alignment criteria and the two specific criteria that deals with learning outcomes, because it is still very vague to some people. We also developed an alignment roadmap. So it starts in the purple section with the member state, where the member state agrees to implement the SADC qualifications framework. Then they establish a national alignment committee, and I see some SADC member states are still using the national alignment committee, although initially we said it would just be for the alignment process, and then because it's a kind of an ad hoc committee. So we developed terms of reference for each country to adapt to suit themselves. Then this National Alignment Committee conducts the alignment. There's a self-assessment questionnaire, but obviously it needs to be driven by a specific agency in a country. Then the National Alignment Committee, they write and approve the alignment report, and then they submit it to the TCCA Executive Committee. The TCCA scrutinizes the alignment report, and so far all the alignment reports have been returned to the National Alignment Committee for further refinement before being submitted to the Technical Committee on Certification and Accreditation. The EXCO also gives considerable feedback to say how the alignment report can be improved. And then when the member states resubmit, they also talk about how they have considered the considerations of the Executive Committee. So as I said here, 2 countries have completed. Mauritius has submitted a draft, and it's been rolled out to other countries. In terms of the quality assurance, this is just an infographic that we developed to assist member countries to advocate the quality assurance guidelines. There are 16 quality assurance guidelines, and this is just an infographic. And some of the questions that member states can ask, and that will help with verification, is, you know, how to make sure that the institutions are recognized. Some people call it validated, some people call it registered, and how to ensure that the qualification, you know, meets all the quality assurance criteria, that it's recognized or validated or registered or accredited, whatever word is used in the member country. Then in terms of that qualifications, infrastructure and databases, where is the information stored? Are they able to get hold of that information? Is it good quality information? When the person leaves, is it easily accessible, or is it only a paper storehouse? Is it digital, and so on? And then also the quality assurance component also looks at different types of capacity building to assist with this, whether internal quality assurance or external quality assurance. As I said, there has been a challenge with COVID. People have been unable to meet, borders being closed, and people were focusing on their own internal arrangements. So it has been a bit slow for this year. In terms of the verifications, we're very strict about counter-fraud measures, because the Addis Convention, one of the prescripts of that is to make sure that countries put in place measures to counter fraud. It is a very bad reputational risk for the region if someone claims to have a qualification from SADC and they don't have that qualification. So we put in some counter fraud measures. Some countries already have counter fraud policies. This is very important to see whether the qualification holder actually did receive that qualification. And Miriam mentioned digital certificates. There's a 4-country pilot. Namibia was included, Zambia was included, South Africa was included, and Botswana was included. I'm not sure where Namibia and Botswana is with their digital certificates, but it's good to see that Miriam and Zambia has moved ahead with that. At the moment, there is the SADC recognition manual. They have started the development of this. This SADC Qualifications Verification Network is a member of the African Qualifications Verification Network, which is also a body that sits on this ACQF, the African Continental Qualifications Framework. And we are hoping that the SADC Qualifications Verification Network can develop policies on verification and counter-fraud measures and so on, so within their scope. I mentioned earlier that there are guidelines for the recognition of prior learning in the Southern African Development Community. We tried doing a study on 5 SADC countries, and we're hoping to roll this out to other African countries. It's very difficult to get information from countries, especially now with COVID. At the moment, the SADC Secretariat is currently, they're finalizing the guidelines on credit accumulation and transfer. And they also try to work on capacity building exercises regarding RPL, CAT, and articulation. In terms of advocacy and communication, and I said Zambia heads up this program, we've got the SADC Qualifications Framework. There is a booklet and a brochure that is available, and we make the electronic copies available so that member states can tell people about the SADC Qualifications Framework and make it known. In terms of the governance and change model, now I explained that the challenge was that there was the central driving mechanism. There's I won't say there's an incapacity, but there was a need to develop capacity to drive this. So we are saying at the country level, if you look at the yellow parts here, at the country level, we need to make sure that whatever is decided at the regional level, that it's implemented. At the moment, the countries carry the costs of the delegates to participate in the SADC Qualifications Framework. It's not ideal. We would have liked to have something where we could invite people to attend meetings, or invite some capacity building workshops where countries do not have to pay for accommodation, traveling, and so on. So we're also wanting countries to, run capacity building workshops to share their expertise across the region. And then we were hoping that an internship program where one intern could be in each of the SADC countries So at least when there is communication, somebody can at least say, I have received your communication and I will make sure that it gets to the relevant parties. So we're saying that we want to strengthen the countries in the SADC region. Obviously, we need the capacity to undertake this. We need the expertise and money and resources. Then the green part here, we're saying at the center, so it's at the region. That is the technical committee. At the moment, the technical committee has taken on a lot of that responsibility. We also encourage member states to volunteer to assist the SADC Secretariat with taking of minutes and drawing up agendas and sending out communication. So we're saying at the center, we would like the center to be strengthened. It would be ideal to have a SADC qualifications framework implementation unit that will run with the implementation of the SADC qualifications framework. But at the moment, we don't have an implementation unit.
Une unité de mise en application.
I'm hearing someone speaking. I'm just going to go ahead. So in the absence of an application of an implementation unit, countries are doing the work themselves, carrying all the delegates' costs, and then at the center, the SADC Secretariat and the technical committee on certification and accreditation, they are running with what needs to be done at the regional level. So in terms of the strategy, just to recap that I've said we want to build capacity at the national level. So in each of the SADC countries, so 16 persons. Then at the regional level, at least 6 persons there for each of the 6 programs of the SADC qualifications framework. Ideally, we need to establish a SADC qualifications framework implementation unit. Just here, so we can implement the Addis Convention, implement the African Continental Qualifications Framework, the qualifications verification network, and then build capacity to do all of these things. Develop statistics on mobility, the recognition manual, build capacity for policy development, digital certificates, and build qualifications information infrastructure. I'm almost done. Second last slide. So in terms of collaboration with other regional qualifications frameworks, one of the principles of the SADC qualifications framework, it is important that the SADC qualifications framework is homegrown. Now, these are principles that you can find in the SADC booklet and guided by the demands of education and training in the region and driven by local experts. And I'm also saying here that the regional cooperation is essential for benchmarking and learning good practice. When we revitalized the SADC qualifications framework, we did a benchmarking visit to the European qualifications framework, and we were very lucky to attend their advisory group meeting. And we left there with such hope, and there was a lot of things that were different. For example, the EQF, the delegates don't have to carry the costs. So that is one thing that is very different there with regards to resourcing. The key lessons that I would say, we must consider the SADC context and agenda, and we must scrutinize critically what works in other contexts. And we must consider what is appropriate for the SADC region. And we need to be mindful of the SADC principles and identity. We need to ensure that cooperation implements a SADC agenda that is linked to an African agenda, particularly when funding is made available. It is very easy to stray from your agenda when funding is made available. Last slide, in terms of COVID, I think the African region has been hit hard. I think there's over 1 million cases. You can, if you click on the link to the SADC Secretariat, you will see that they provide regular bulletins. I've just put a screenshot of the SADC Secretariat's website. They provide regular bulletins on the regional response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Work has been able to continue with online meetings. We just had our meeting with the Technical Committee on Certification and Accreditation on Tuesday, and we were very, very lucky to have Eduarda there to speak about the African Continental Qualifications Framework. At that meeting, Tanzania handed over to Mozambique because each SADC country gets 1 year to be the chairperson of SADC. So it was a successful meeting, and we were able to meet. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Colleen, for this very clear, succinct, and to the point presentation. I don't know if there are any questions. I don't see many questions on the presentation so far, but participants, you can still add questions, because even if you don't have time now to discuss them all, we can get replies for you later on. Since we are very close then to the end of our webinar, I would like just to inform that first, we will not do the usual the usual interactive assessment because time doesn't allow. But next time we will have a debate, a round table and debate, and this will be simply a different way of concluding the webinar today. So now we will have the pleasure to interact with Dr. James Joey. He is the education officer of the EAC, so East Africa Community, a community of 6 countries. James, would you like to share your screen for your presentation? Thank you. James, I think you will share your screen, or do you prefer us to do it for you?
Put that up. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, Eduarda.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, James. We are waiting for your screen sharing.
Yes, I should share my screen.
Or you prefer us to do it for you?
I could do so. Could you see my screen?
Not yet. Have you started the share screening?
Yes, I already clicked share screen.
The green button?
Then you could share on your end. Then I present.
Okay, that's good. Erica, would you please?
Yes, just a second, and I will share.
Because I want to put the chat. So when you want to move ahead, of course, James, you will tell just a word, and Erica will move then to the next slide. Thank you.
So I could go ahead.
Yes, and you can
Okay.
put in Erica in screen. Yeah.
Another wording specifically with the promotion of the language in areas and countries partner states that don't have.
Hello, so I can go ahead.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Now I'll present the qualifications framework for the East African community. And sorry for the time lost. I'll try to be brief. And the East African community brings together 6 partner states, which is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan. And it has a long history that relates to the first community that collapsed in 1977 and the new community in which we are now, which has these 6 partner states. The first one had the three, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and it had a strong history in educational cooperation, which actually still plays a key role in anchoring many of the things that we are trying to do today. So it's one of the fastest growing communities in Africa today, and we have achieved quite a bit in cooperation in education. I could take the next slide. One of the main goals of the community is to facilitate regional integration, and this is where harmonization of education comes in strongly. The 6 partner states have committed within the treaty establishing the community to cooperate in education, human resource development, research, and training, and that is why these common policies and principles and frameworks are quite important. And these also relate to, I could take the next slide. When you look at the second pillar, the Common Market Protocol, which came into force in 2010, Article 11 of that protocol requires the community to facilitate the mobility of students and professionals by recognizing both academic and professional qualifications. And this is a very strong anchoring of what we are doing now in developing these regional qualifications framework. Next slide. And the harmonization of the education systems of the EAC partner states, as I've given in the brief history before, is anchored on that Article 102 of the treaty and related also to the Common Market Protocol that I've mentioned. And this started in the year 2008 when the community undertook a study to see how best we could harmonize the education systems of the community. And 7 strategies were developed covering the different cycles of education. And the higher education level has been totally or completely harmonized through the efforts of the Inter-University Council for East Africa. And I would like to mention also clearly from the start that our regional qualifications framework is not only for the higher education sector, but is quite holistic. It covers the different cycles, the different levels, but the focus here, the higher education level, university level moved much faster. The other levels are also contained within these qualifications frameworks, but there are some specifications that still need to be developed. I take the next slide. For the higher education sector, it is mainly to develop a framework for comparability of systems within the partner states of East Africa. And a number of rationales that we have that have been talked about in the previous presentations are actually common for the East African region. And most important to state in this slide is the fact that through these efforts of harmonization, the East African Community region was declared a common higher education area on 20th May 2017. And this means that the region is expected to facilitate a lot of mobility of students, teachers, and professionals. And that even anchors the undertaking we are having on this qualifications framework to have even more relevance and implications. So the operationalization of it will actually also facilitate the operationalization of this common higher education area. And one of the immediate consequences that students moving within this region now pay same fee as home students of the receiving institution. And there are quite a number of activities going on within the centers of excellence, within the mobility of students between the universities, mobility of professionals within the mutual recognition agreements, which I'm responsible for, which actually now takes us forward as ways of implementing this common higher education area and actually the common market protocol that I already talked about. Next slide. And largely the framework I'm talking about today has been developed through the Inter-University Council for East Africa. Within the East African community, we have developed certain specialized institutions for key areas of our activities, and one of them is the Inter-University Council for East Africa, which is located in Kampala, Uganda, whose main responsibility is to coordinate higher education. Most of the activities and responsibilities of the council are listed there for your reference. Next slide. In 2013, as this process was going on, the IUCA, which is our institution, undertook a study which actually made it very possible to anchor the development of this qualifications framework. They looked at the qualifications types, learning cycles, qualifications levels, entry articulations, all those aspects listed, which was an important precursor to the development of the qualifications framework for the East African community. I'll take the next one. The process of developing these qualifications framework has been quite participatory, which means that it brought together different stakeholders, including government ministries responsible for education and even immigration. It brought in the quality assurance agencies in the different partner states, other stakeholders, including the private sector, to enable us develop this instrument that could enable classification of qualifications based on those set criteria, and also integrating the education and training from the different partner states into one unified structure, which could be recognized by all. And a number of other rationales, as I had mentioned earlier, allowing comparability of qualifications and movement of credits after agreeing on what credits are and the conditions for moving, allowing for credit mobility. And the last bullet is actually what I started with, the participatory approach that was used in developing this. Then I take the next slide. This is actually the key aspects of the East African Community Qualifications Framework for Higher Education. We have the structure, which includes the qualifications descriptors for each of the levels, the qualifications types for the different levels, the multiple entry and exit strategies for, and this is also anchored on what some of the different presenters earlier had talked about, the provision of the different pathways from the different levels of education up to allowing participants in the process to get up to the higher levels of education, which is the university level. And also recognition of prior learning, be they formal, informal, or non-formal, and how these are assessed to allow participation in the different pathways that they qualify to get into. And then lastly, the credit accumulation and transfer, where our credit system is also notional, where 1 credit means 10 hours, and also modalities for facilitating the transfer of credits across institutions in the different institutions and systems in the different partner states. I could take the next slide. That is just the cover of the document of our qualifications framework. I could take the next slide. I think these, as I've already alluded to that, and I noted that we already lost quite some amount of time in the earlier presentations. This is actually part of the rationale why we have the framework convergence scales for the different levels, better understanding of achievements, comparability of qualifications, a tool to enable development of skills and employability. And this actually resonates quite well with us as a community, because we would like to develop skills together, possibly also through our respective centers of excellence, which are dedicated to develop skills at different areas, especially where there are serious deficits. And also as a common market, we have to provide opportunities, wider opportunities for employability across the community, which now is a common market with different rights and freedoms given to the citizens. Next. This is for the higher education level, the qualifications framework. For our qualifications framework, I noted that I don't remember very well whether the SADC one had 10 levels, but ours has 8. But you'll find that the other partner states within the community have 10 levels, but that's not the most important. So the higher education level has the following levels, sub-levels within that level of education. So since this was the level that I was largely focusing on, and which the Inter-University Council has largely developed, these are the levels for the higher education sector. The next. As was explained in the SADC qualifications framework, this framework also recognizes prior learning. And this is to acknowledge the skills, competencies, and other ethos obtained through formal training, non-formal training, and other experiences that the learners could have gone through. And these are measured against specific learning outcomes and can possibly also be verified. The next slide. The next slide mainly presents to us the building blocks of the qualifications framework, which also relate to what I've just said. The non-formal learning is taken into consideration and recognize the formal learning and the informal learning. And this is also based on the competency-based approach to learning, based on learning outcomes and the competencies that the learners are expected to demonstrate after completing each cycle. We could go to the next one. I think this is the level descriptors, and this also came out in the SADC presentation and the other presentations. What are considered largely within the learning outcomes at the different levels are the knowledge competencies that the learners do demonstrate, the practical skills that they need to demonstrate at the end of completing the learning provided at each of the levels, the social skills, which are also now quite important in the region within the competency-based approach that we have used, which go hand in hand with the values, attitudes, and the professionalism, which we need to also build in and inculcate. Communication, leadership, team building skills, information management, lifelong learning, and some of these have now been included in actually, they run across the different levels of these qualifications framework. There are still some challenges on how to verify some of them because some of these are much softer, but the mechanisms for verifications have been developed and need just to be sharpened. The next. These are just the different levels that I have mentioned before, and you could see how it runs from level 1, where we have the basic education, to the level 8 with the doctoral education. And these levels have sub-levels within them, which can be seen in details when you look at the qualification framework in details. I could take the next slide. These are the minimum credits for graduation within the different levels. And as I mentioned earlier, one credit is taken to be 10 hours. This could be for actual learning within formal learning setups or other attributes that learners can gain in other related trainings that contribute to that overall qualification. And you can see how they run to the lower levels of the qualifications framework. It also shows on the last part the different types of qualifications that correspond to the qualification, the different credit levels, from the basic general education to the upper postgraduate level education. I think the TVET sector doesn't come strongly here because right now we are embarking on the process of finalizing the qualifications framework for TVET, though some specifications for the TVET sector has already been given within this general qualifications framework, but we have to operationalize the TVET sector, which will be shown just slightly in one next slide. Next one. Yeah, to enable us operationalize this qualification framework, there are policies which are actually like an addendum towards the end of the publication, which is this qualifications framework. And this includes the policies for issuance of qualifications, the different pathways, which I had already mentioned earlier, the qualifications register and policy, and where this register is deposited, usually the qualifications authorities in the different partner states and the commissions or councils for university education, especially for the university level, has this and coordinated centrally by the Inter-University Council for East Africa. Then the other policy is the addition and removal to the qualifications. Then guidelines for alignment with national qualifications frameworks. And what I could have said from the onset is that the regional qualifications framework also operates or acts as a very important reference point for the national qualifications frameworks. And it doesn't mean that we do not have we do away with the national qualifications frameworks, but the partner states have to align their national qualifications frameworks to the regional one. And this requires a number of things, including developing capacity, as was indicated in the previous presentation too. And also to note that the different partner states are at different levels with this process, with Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania really much higher than compared to, for example, Burundi and South Sudan, who are some of the latest entrants into the East African community. And also important and also alluded to in the previous presentation is the recognition of prior learning. And I think there are so many similarities and overlaps when I was listening to the other presentations, and these actually builds a case for closer cooperation between the different regions. I see a lot of similarities with the SADC region, a lot of similarities with the national qualifications frameworks that have been presented before, irrespective of the regions they come from. And there is a lot of room for even wider coordination between beyond a regional body like the East African community and working together with other regions. And I think this is part of what this process is supposed to enable us to get to. We get to the next slide. This is largely about governance, how the process is governed, and maybe there would have been some questions on how partner states respond to this. And here we list how they use the qualifications framework largely as a reference tool, as I indicated earlier. And they relate their national qualifications framework in this to the regional one to provide more transparency in the undertakings that the partner states would use. And it's also important in contributing to the quality assurance within the partner state systems and using the learning outcomes, which I talked about earlier in defining and describing the qualifications so that these are common across the different partner states. And the partner states finally have a responsibility of designating a national authority to be responsible for this, and that's why in almost all of our partner states there are national qualifications authorities being established, and also they are the councils responsible for university education, whose main mandate is actually to undertake quality assurance within the higher education sector. And what the East African community does through the Inter-University Council is to convene regular meetings of these qualifications authorities and councils to enable them share experiences, develop these policies and principles together, and ensure to the extent possible that they do work. Next slide. This is about what IUCA does, which I've already alluded to, bringing together these authorities and councils and other stakeholders, ensuring that the system is sustainable and sustainably managed, continue to build confidence in these qualifications frameworks, both at national and regional level, and also to build capacity, which was indicated earlier. And maybe this is an area where we have not done so much. Maybe the national qualifications authorities have done much on capacity building, but I think it is one area which we can work on at a regional level and also in collaboration with other regional qualifications frameworks or other regional or international players. And also important is the fifth one, to align this regional framework with other international qualifications. And I think this is part of what this process is leading us to, or will contribute to, as I had earlier mentioned. I could take the next one. I think this was to talk a bit about the TVET level. Something is missing, so I could the level. Okay, just go to the next. Is okay. I was asked to mention a bit about the impacts of COVID-19 on the operationalization of our qualifications framework. But generally, I think across the world and largely for Africa and specifically for East Africa, the pandemic itself has been unprecedented and the consequences to the education system the same. And up to now, we have not got out of this. Still, in most of our partner states, the education sector is still largely closed, though we have had varied responses by the partner states in which the United Republic of Tanzania didn't close its schools. The schools are running normally. Burundi is running the same, but in some partner states such as Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, there had been impacts that led to closure of schools, and some are beginning to open up again, but not fully. There have been some negative impacts and drawbacks that have actually affected some of the gains we have made in operating regionally. And part of this is parochial nationalism. The COVID-19 actually made partner states or nations to look much more inwards than the regional approach that we have had before. It enabled us to see how fragile our education systems were, that such an act or such an occurrence could actually completely bring education to a stop in the whole community and almost in the whole world. And another indication to us is the weak sustainability of our education systems. With COVID-19, the region could not have other alternative mechanisms to provide education. And it has been a very important wake-up call for the region now to collectively or individually as nations to look at alternatives that can propel learning in such situations or even when such situations are not there. Related to that is the poor infrastructure for online delivery. And I saw a question popping up about inclusivity, and that bullet could partly respond to that. We saw very glaring situations of the exclusivity of the systems. Many were left out, especially when certain schools or systems tried to deploy online delivery. Very specific to the operationalization of our framework, mobility and exchange of students, staff, and professionals came almost to a complete halt. Right now, it's still very difficult to move. And we had students in the different partner states. We had to put aside a special COVID fund to ensure that the students who were studying in the different centers of excellence in the different partner states could still continue to be there and had some cushioning to continue being there. But there were a number of social challenges across the board for teachers, the learners, the parents, and a lot of time lost. We could take the next slide, which could all actually be my last. But they say that there is no such disaster without positive sides. I think it has been a very important learning session for us. We have had different meetings of our sectoral councils for health, for education, and our different stakeholders. And it has been a very important wake-up call for the community and the different nations in this region to invest in ICT and get alternative ways of providing learning. And a lot of effort is already going on with this. It has also led to a lot of attitude change towards doing things the way we are doing, which actually will facilitate, in a way, the implementation of these frameworks. Previously, when people were asked to join online trainings, to join online classes, the attitude was quite different. But now, largely, a day doesn't pass without people being in these online platforms. And for me, who has worked on internationalization for some time, this is really a game changer. That's my next item. such that we will not so much need to get air tickets, go to, we can facilitate a bit of this, especially capacity building. We can do a lot of capacity exchange, capacity building through these online mechanisms. And related to that, it can actually facilitate and speed up the implementation of our regional qualifications framework, because these platforms can give us opportunities for capacity building, sharing experiences, discussing issues that could be hindrances or barriers to the implementation of the framework. We see better the roles of the centers of excellence. Some of them played a very important role in coming up with some interventions, including the universities in the different partner states. It brought up more concretely the need to enhance, to harmonize regional policies and frameworks so that even in such circumstances, there is still seamless flow of people, flow of students, flow of teachers, though within the basic restrictions that can be attributed to health issues and etc. The new pedagogical approaches do not need to be elaborated more based on the online learning that we had already mentioned earlier. And this also requires a lot of capacity building, especially for the teachers. We have identified quite a lot of gaps, weaknesses in our system, which actually need to be responded to, and support systems, especially to children, whether they're in school or out of schools. We saw a lot of deficits, which are also for teachers, as I already mentioned earlier. And lastly, the need to build on efficiencies of our systems. I think if we try the next one, it might be actually the end of my presentation, and I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. James. It was you did your best really to do your presentation in a very efficient and straightforward manner with a lot of interesting insights and proposals. Thanks for all the very constructive proposals you already brought forward. Our time is really, we are beyond half an hour beyond our agenda, the duration of our webinar, but I know that many of you still have a bit of patience, just for 5 minutes, if you don't mind, not more than 5 minutes. And I'd like just to ask 1 or 2 questions and then just do a super short summary of some of the important points in our view. So particularly from the point of view of ACQF, the Continental Framework in Construction. So a question that I'd like to address, redirect, let's say, to both of you, perhaps even, James and Colleen, who presented the regional qualifications frameworks. And the question that comes from Jeffy Mukora about the African Standards and Guidelines for Quality Assurance, which were adopted last year. And so this is a policy instrument, an initiative, a continental initiative under the PAQAF, so Pan-African Quality Assurance and Accreditation Framework. So the question is to what extent you are, let's say, taking into account the ASGQA. Probably this is an important question for when we look at the relationship that is perhaps already being developed or not enough between the RQFs and these continental policy instruments. And if you would like to say, just to say your point, your position, or your view about this, the ASGQA. And the question is also addressed, of course, to Colleen. Actually, initially it was addressed to Colleen when you spoke about the implementation program related with quality assurance in the SADC qualifications framework. James, or would like?
Thank you very much, Eduarda. I can't give you a specific answer because Botswana heads up the quality assurance component. And also, I don't have enough information on it. I was still under the impression that those quality assurance guidelines hadn't been approved at the AU level yet. So I'm not too sure about, so if it has been approved, then I don't know about it. And unfortunately, I can't give you much more than that. But Botswana, who is also part of the SADC Quality Assurance Network, I'm sure they would have taken into account all the continental initiatives.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There is also another question that is a fundamental
Maybe I could add a bit on that, but not so far from what my colleague has mentioned. And I think this is where we actually call for more coordination from the continental level, in the sense that we as regional economic communities still lack good platforms to work to come together, and that's actually to enable us align our processes with the continental initiatives. In the recent past, there have now been initiatives to facilitate and to enable us align our initiatives such as this framework to the continental level initiatives. I think these activities part of possibly such kind of a process. But also another important process aspect that I wanted to mention is that our framework is subject to constant review from time to time when situations demand. And when you look at when we began, we were mainly anchoring on the adoption of the Arusha Convention by UNESCO in which has gone on up to the year 2002, and that was quite important. But a number of continental developments have already taken place, which will now require that we align our frameworks to the continental developments, and to enable us facilitate mobility and utilizations of these frameworks continentally. This actually, I think, is the way to go, and where the next steps need to lead to after the regions complete these processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I'd like also to raise an important question that is also in the chat box, and is a question for everybody at any time. It's always the question of the contribution to, the impact, let's say. So what are the benefits, for example, of the National Qualifications Framework of Cabo Verde? The question came from Sierra Leone, and of course this is related also with the current process of reflection and construction that is taking place in the country, in Sierra Leone. So the question of the benefits, the concrete, how are the benefits, let's say, monitored, evaluated, etc. And I think this is a question that we can discuss further at the next webinar, since it's always a fundamental question. Why, what, how, and to what extent the whys are being reached through the actions and funding and policies of countries and regions. In this context, I would like also to mention that we are planning a webinar exactly dedicated to this question of monitoring, evaluation, assessment of the contribution of qualifications frameworks to the objectives they have defined. And we will do this with a number of countries, presenting the way they actually follow up, review, revise their frameworks over time. There are more questions, and I will not be able now to continue taking more of your time, because I just would like to say a few final points. So first of all, as always, we have an assessment of the debates today, and today our assessment has 5 questions. And my colleague Erica already made available the link to the Mentimeter in the chat box. So you can please simply look up and respond. It's always a good way to see to what extent all the information intensively presented today is clear for all of you. Of course, you have the presentations available in the web page. And you also have a web page with all the materials prepared, discussed so far in these 6 webinars. Erica also shared with you the link. I also shared in my emails. So the next webinar will be in a week, 29th, and this will be the 7th webinar of this first series. And there we will have 2 national qualifications frameworks. So one that is still in the making. It will be then Sierra Leone in the first steps of reflection. And the first presentation will be done by SAQA to present then the experience of the National Qualifications Framework of South Africa, which has more than 2 decades of life and work. Then we will have also a presentation on Europass digital credentials. It will complement the brief information we received today about digital certificates in the case of Zambia and SADC qualifications frameworks. And then a round table, of course, a virtual round table on 2 questions. Those of you who have already looked up the agenda for the 7th webinar saw the questions we are proposing. So we will have approximately 5-6 participants contributing, responding to these questions. These are participants who have been all the time present in all webinars of the series. And I think this will be a good way to conclude this first series of webinars. Now, I just would like to thank very much all of you and the speakers in particular for their commitment, professionalism, in first of all preparing these very comprehensive, insightful, and also beautiful presentations, for sharing all this experience and expertise in such a generous manner, for sharing also such, let's say, good ideas as we heard now in the last presentations about future steps, and particular about further interactions, further cooperation, perhaps initiate a more systematic way of cooperation between the regional qualifications frameworks, the national qualifications frameworks on the continent. And if these webinars have contributed to that purpose, then it's already a very good result. The digital transformation of work, of exchanges, of meetings that has been accelerated, let's say, due or thanks to the COVID-19 crisis, is in fact supporting us all in moving ahead. And this capacity building and sharing moments that we have been organizing would not have been possible, I think, if in conventional manners that are usually extremely expensive and time consuming. So we hope really to continue this way of exchanging and creating knowledge. And since we have very, very good materials prepared by all of you, the peers who have been sharing their experiences at these 6 and soon 7 webinars, we are also looking at the possibility to create a sort of a volume, let's say, a book, and of course, with all these materials that can be easily used by all of you, not only those who are at the starting steps of reflection towards their national qualifications frameworks, but also those who are already on the way and they have consolidated, are consolidating their NQFs or even reviewing them. We always learn from different stages of development. Finally, I also would like to say just an important point about advocacy and communication. So this point was made during the presentation, both of Zambia, Miriam, and SADC qualifications framework. And this is certainly a very fundamental, issue and not always easily addressed. So at national level, at regional and the continental level, and probably this kind of a systematic network and networking is important to make this happen. The advocacy, communication, and this mutual understanding and even, let's say, mutual help in a way. Those who have more experience and know how they overcame the challenges, sharing with those that are starting their processes. So thank you so much, all of you. Thank you very much, Miriam, Amilcar, Colleen, and James. in very different parts of this incredibly wonderful continent. And let us meet again on the 29th. Please join the webinar. You already received all the links to register and join. And we will see Colleen, I think, again next week, presenting probably the South African Qualifications Framework. Thank you very much, everybody. And see you then in just 1 week. If